welcome to our first Perfect Wedding Guide virtual lunch. Hope you've got your lunch with you. We're going to eat afterwards, so we're going to be hungry while you're enjoying your lunch. But seriously, though, we're glad that you could join us today. We've got some great information we want to share with you. Right now, the chat is open, and it's open for you just to say hi to each other. Once we get into the actual meat of our presentation, we will turn the chat so it just comes into our moderator, Emily, and she will see any questions that you want fielded if we have time for that at the end of the day. So again, we appreciate you coming in today and spending your lunchtime with us. I think you're going to find some very valuable information. Couple updates for you. Everybody's worrying about wedding shows and what's going to happen in January. Well, we've talked to a couple producers here in the last couple days, and there are some changes that are happening even now. Most of you are familiar with Tracy Claiborne and the Claiborne Production Show that was scheduled at Nutter Center in January. You notice I said scheduled because it's now been changed to the 16th and 17th of January at Presidential Banquet Center in Kettering. That is also a tentative situation based upon the regulations that have to be approved. So just be aware of that, that the Nutter Center show is not going to happen. If it does happen, it's going to be a week later at the Presidential Banquet Center. Also, we've heard from the Wendy's show in Cincinnati. That date has also been moved now to May 1st and 2nd. So again, just take note of that. Bridal shows are going to be interesting this coming year. Hopefully this is all going to blow over soon and we're going to have the ability to get back to a new healthy norm. So we are coming up on the end of the year. I want to make you aware of that. If you're not knowing that, Christmas is around the corner, then comes New Year's. And of course at New Year's, your PWG listing that is a free listing right now will go away. So keep that in mind. We do want to make sure that you get listed on Perfect Wedding Guide. So we've got a little incentive for you to help motivate you to get that done before the first of the year. Why is it so important to get it done before the first of the year? Well, if your inquiries or your leads coming to you have not at least doubled in this last week, because that's what's going on. Everybody's getting engaged during the holiday season and they are reaching out to potential vendors. So you need to make sure that your presence is where people can find you. And Perfect Wedding Guide certainly is one of those ways that can be done. So here's the incentive for you. If you get on with us before the first of the year, then we're going to give you a free listing on the eventconnections.com website once it opens in January as well. So another kind of a 2-for-1 deal for you there. So let's get you posted out on Perfect Wedding Guide. And if you've got any questions, by all means, reach out to us here and we'll be happy to answer those questions. We're coming today to you live. This is not pre-recorded. And we're at the Event Connections studio in our Dayton office. This particular studio has been revamped and designed to do both photo and video work. So if you are interested in doing a webcast, possibly a YouTube video, a podcast, maybe training videos or a commercial, this studio is available to you. And of course, photographers, it's a full-fledged photo studio as well. So make sure that you reach out to us again and we'll be happy to tell you all about our studio here at the Event Connections in our Dayton office. So today we've got a special guest for you. And Tim Fritz, the president of TGF Holdings, is with us. And Tim, I'm just going to throw it over to you and have you introduce Lisa.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. Hey, I'm glad that you're on with us today or listening to this maybe a few days later. We want to make sure that these luncheons are of value to you. I think lots of times whenever I go to a luncheon, I get some tip that saves me money. I learn ways of doing a better business, or I meet a contact or meet somebody that gives me a lead. And to be truthful, that's been the best part of being with Perfect Wedding Guide, is being in that community, that we have. Well, I want to introduce you today someone that I met at 10 years ago at a luncheon. It was in Centerville. I got an email. I could go there. We had some free pizza and soda, and we were all crammed in this real small room. And at that luncheon, I met the person that would become my accountant for the next 10 years. And something that I felt at that luncheon, there was a certain comfort level I had. I feel like if you're working with somebody, there needs to be a comfort level. I always felt with my past accountant, like the meter was running, what can I don't want to ask that question. I don't want to seem like I'm stupid, or something like that. But I think today, if you don't have an accountant, if you need one, I'll tell you right now, she's a great one. But I know you have bookkeepers. I have a bookkeeper, Jessica DePerna is our bookkeeper. And I know Alisa has really helped a lot with Jessica in developing better skills and things with her. But I'd like to introduce to you Alisa Livesay. She's with Mosaic Strategic Partners. And like I said, we met about 10 years ago. This whole year has been crazy with the PPP and do I qualify and how do I make sure I don't have to pay that back and just all these different questions. And she's got a lot of credentials. Alisa, maybe tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, first I want to thank you guys for having me here, and I'm happy to participate and hopefully answer some of the questions that I'm sure are out there with things that are going on. But just a brief background. I'm originally from Dayton, grew up actually not too far from where we're sitting here today. I'm a CPA. I'm also a certified financial planner. I have a full range of clients from individuals, sole proprietorships, to small businesses, to businesses as large as yours, and even a couple that are bigger. So we kind of run the gamut. And for companies that don't have their own accountant or their own bookkeeper, we actually do back office services. So it just, when my husband and I started this, we decided that, we wanted to be flexible, and we wanted to have, what was more important to us is to have great relationships with people. A lot of people think of accountants as very transactional, like you were referring to. And yeah, that's okay. But I love my clients. And if I don't, then I'm not the right fit for them. And so that's been my goal. And I'm glad for, where we are. So, and I can't believe it's been 10 years already. It'll be another 25, right? So
you teach, don't you?
I taught for 12 years at the University of Dayton. I left there. I was a lecturer in the School of Business, teaching finance and accounting, and left at the end of 2016 to focus more on the business. And sometimes I miss it, but I still teach. I teach with clients. I teach with,
right.
On a daily basis. And I have some businesses that are small entrepreneurs that maybe didn't have the benefit of that kind of an education or have the exposure. So I like to try and bring some of the big six accounting that I had, down to the
Right.
local business level.
Nice. So this past year, I know that they had the PPP program came out, and it was almost like if you didn't have a banker friend, which I have one of those, but if you didn't have one, you missed out. They ran out of money. It was like all these big companies and got money. And I remember some vendors that were left without, and then they came through with the second wave. With that, this year I've had the PPP loan that I was able to acquire. I also took advantage with one of the companies with the disaster relief money that was there. That was a $10,000 grant that I didn't have to pay back. And then recently you made me aware through the CARES Act that Montgomery County had a grant for $10,000 that I've applied for. So how should companies maybe prepare for other things that might be coming out here in the future? Do you have any updates on that?
Yeah, so why don't we start first with kind of an update about where we are with the first PPP, right? So right now, the PPP that companies may have received starting in April of earlier this year, up until probably end of June was the last time that you could apply for that, are now starting to go through the forgiveness process. It took the banks a while to get to those portals, and even some of them aren't even quite ready yet. So if you received a PPP loan, you're probably at that stage. And if you're working with an accountant, who's helping you with that process, they may say, well, hold off, or they may, it just depends on your situation. But I just wanted to remind you that even if the bank is saying, I've had this happen in the last few weeks, a couple of clients like, it says I have a payment due, but isn't that supposed to be forgiven? And the reality is that they set up their system just to show something, but you actually have until 10 months after your covered period to apply for forgiveness. So you have plenty of time to do that. And, there's pending legislation. You may have heard in the last couple of weeks, particularly in the last day or so, about a stimulus. Some parties are calling it the Emergency Act, right, for $908 billion. And in that, there is another $288 billion supposed to be set aside for small business support. And included in that is a couple of things that are kind of important. One is actually further additional simplified forgiveness process. So currently, if you had a loan that was under $50,000, the forgiveness process is very simple. It's, a few questions, give your bank the documents, and then it's forgiven. No, beyond that, there's not too many other questions. But they're hoping to raise that to maybe 150,000. We'll see how that actually turns out. So right, in some ways, if you have 10 months, so maybe not to rush it just because you can wait. The other thing that's probably even more important, and I want to actually make sure that you're aware of, is PPP deductibility. So in the CARES Act, when it was passed, it was specifically called out by Congress that this money received would not be taxable income. Fantastic. However, the IRS and Treasury then came back and interpreted that as, well, if you receive the income and it's not taxable, then the expenses that you have related to that, so payroll, rent, utilities, well, you can't deduct those on your tax return. So now all of a sudden we're like, wait a minute. So that's not the intent that Congress had. And pretty quickly, the Senate actually had a proposed bill to fix that, right, but it's been held up, and it's been held up in the House. So in this proposal that's on the table, that's one of the key issues. So the AICPA, which is the American Institute of CPAs, the Ohio Society of CPAs, and many state CPAs societies are advocating to get that deductible, because otherwise you might have a surprise tax bill. So just be aware of that. And if you, like I said, if you're working with somebody, you might want to talk to them about it if they haven't talked to you about it already. I've been telling all of my clients, hey, we don't know what's going to happen. Right. We hope it's a question of when, not if. So those are two very important updates that I think that is happen. Related to that, in that 288 billion, there is the potential for a second PPP. However, this is going to be more restrictive. It's going to be tied to a revenue decline. And the current information is it'll likely be 25 to 35% revenue decline required, but we don't know the comparison period. We don't know if that's year over year. We don't know if that's we don't know any of that information. The text of this legislation actually is now kind of in process, assuming that they can get a few more points agreed upon. So, but when it gets passed, it will be very quickly. The soonest it could get passed would be tomorrow. But that's not looking like that's going to happen based on the last 12 hours, because there's a couple of sticking points related to unemployment. And so in the news, that what is happening is they're going to pass a 1 week federal budget provision, so that next week. So it either gets passed tomorrow, which is not likely at this point, or it's next week. So that means next week you want to make sure you're ready to go. So what does that mean? Well, if there is this revenue issue that's declining, you want to make sure that all your current bookkeeping is up to date, right? Because you're going to have some kind of reports and some kind of documentations. At this point, we don't know exactly what's going to be needed, but if it's anything like the first PPP, it's going to be what's been your payroll, what's been your head count, and now probably what's your revenue been. So I would encourage everyone to, work in the next week if you haven't kept up to date, to get that stuff up to date.
Right. I tell you, how do you get your information, or what?
So I personally, I I've never been so happy to pay my dues to the American Institute of CPAs and the Ohio Society of CPAs, because they are not only working for us as a profession, but for small businesses. They really are. So they're my first place, and also because it's nonpartisan. The second is I actually look at a lot of news. I follow probably 8 different news sources, just to see what the different things are. And I will go to the source, right? To go, what does Ohio tax legislature saying? What is Congress saying as far as that is concerned?
That's great to have somebody in your corner that's keeping up to date on that, because I don't have time to read all the Congress stuff or even interpret it. It's crazy. Hey, we just had an election, and so we know, the Democrats have taken the control of the presidency, but also there's in Georgia, there's a chance that that the Senate may change with this results from Georgia. Is that going to have any impact, do you think, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so surprisingly, actually some of the movement that we finally now have in this $908 billion is because that there seemed to be, the results weren't exactly the way everybody thought that they were going to be. So, if both Senate seats go Democrat in Georgia, then that means that the Democrats would have a majority in both the House, which is, by the way, that's where all tax legislation has to generate. It has to originate in the House. And then they would also have it in the Senate. And then, of course, with the presidency. And so their agenda originally, if there had been a wide majority in both of those, was pretty expansive, including tax increases for certain individuals, changes to some corporation tax laws that may affect small business, may not, depending on how that would happen. Climate change, healthcare, which would affect small businesses. And so there was this wide range of things. Now it's looking like that maybe that won't happen, at least in the next 2 years, but it still is kind of dependent on what happens with these 2 seats, in Georgia. And so all eyes are on Georgia, January 5th when that election happens. So.
Okay. Well, I know Ohio's made some changes to small business tax regulations. What changes are there for the next tax season? As a small business owner, what do I need to know?
So a couple of things that have happened. So hopefully you're not one of the clients who gets a notice from the state of Ohio, but this past month is the month where they're sending out notice. So if you have a compliance issue, you may get something. So Ohio has rolled out an online response, which is fantastic, so that you can actually respond to those through the OBG if you are a member, if you have a login with the Ohio Business Gateway. If not, you can actually find it on the website as well. But one of the big changes, in some ways it's a little bit more advantageous for accountants, but for firms like you, where we have multiple cities in the state of Ohio, there is now going to be the availability, and it has been for the last couple of years, but it was kind of hit or miss, but now it's a centralized way to file city tax returns in one place and to do that electronically. So that's a huge, from a practitioner standpoint, if there's people who operate in multiple cities,
right?
I have a couple of clients, they have 15 city returns because they're real estate agents, and so we get this huge stack of paper. Yeah. So we're looking forward to maybe not having to do that.
Well, even in the event industry,
absolutely,
we're performing in events, and they treat us sort of like they do the sports people.
Absolutely,
sports people go perform in different cities, and then they apply those taxes. And here I had one city that, it ended up I had to pay a whole bunch of back taxes because
of one event.
Right. So anyhow.
Of one event. Yeah. So related to that, there has been a couple of things that we probably need to make sure that people are aware. So if you have employees that may be working from home, right? So, in the state of Ohio, your city where you work is where you have withholding taxes for W-2 employees. But with the passage of the state of emergency that the governor passed in March, which is still active for what it's worth, that people who are working from home, it's like, well, wait a minute, but I don't work in the city of Riverside where we are now. I work in, I working at home, which is a township, and I don't have taxes. So why am I still having to pay taxes? But there was a bill that was passed in the state of Ohio that specifically said, while we have the state of emergency plus 30 days, you do it as if you were still working at that primary work location. So I would expect that that would continue. We'll see what happens, but that's something that employers should be aware of, that they still have that particular responsibility. For 2021, no change in the tax withholding tables, which doesn't affect most small businesses because they use a payroll system that automatically updates and corrects that as well. So notice that happened in just the last week is that, or the last month or so, is Jobs and Family Services have issued your 2021 Ohio unemployment rate. And there is it sounds like a little bit of an additional amount because the state will, because of all the unemployment claims this year, the state level has gone down. So they try and keep a safe harbor amount. And so you may see just a slight increase in your rate for 2021 for that.
So you had mentioned to me that a lot of small businesses are vulnerable right now because they don't know who to go to. They don't know, how to find out these answers to these questions. So what kind of relationship should a small business person have? And how do they find a good accountant?
So I think the best way to find somebody that works best for you is referral. Honestly, you happened to find us when we were doing some lunch and learns, 10 years ago. And I think that specific one was on franchising. And so that asking in community groups, I'm a part of a community group on Facebook in Centerville that was started by somebody at my church. And so I think that's probably the best place to start. Mm-hmm. But then once you have that name, is actually then do an interview, right? In my opinion, because it's how I operate, is I'm always willing to have a short conversation with somebody to say, well, tell me about your situation and to see if I'm a good fit, right? And if I'm not, then I say, you know what, I'm probably not the right person, but I might know somebody who is. So I would encourage people to do that and, to find out what they're looking for. A lot of times accountants and CPAs are thought of as being that very transaction and, one time and that's it. And that's okay. That's not how I like to have client relationships, but sometimes that's all that's needed. So.
Right. Something that I have found, it seems like so many people that are in the industry do something else too. Or maybe you might have some people who they're in the industry and they're working at it part-time and they have a regular full-time job. But I think that, I know lots of times I've run things by you and it's the advice that you give me, makes me think. And then, maybe I don't want to do that, or maybe, what's the best thing? So I feel as though, a relationship that you have with an accountant or with a lawyer or with anyone, it needs to be one that you're comfortable with. So, two, I think that if you being working with me and seeing the event industry, I would think other event professionals may have very similar things, similar systems. We happen to have, one of the people that works with on our website, I know is a client of yours, mm-hmm. And we were struggling with the PPP loan some, and he and I shared some notes, but really it having that community to work with, I think is really important. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to take some questions. I don't want to just me ramble on. I don't know if there are some questions that are out there. We'd love to hear from you. If there's some, we've got Emily right now is manning the computer and has the ability to take your questions. You could submit your questions through the computer, and then she can go ahead and we can ask those. So Is there anything there that we want to talk about, or?
We don't have any questions yet, but we'll just wait a couple seconds and see if people are typing or want to type in some questions they can.
So while we're waiting for some questions, there was one thing that I did want to mention. So while we're kind of waiting for this federal PPP that happens, you mentioned earlier that about the 10,000 grant that was Montgomery County. So as part of the CARES Act, there was additional money that was given to the states, and then the states pushed it down. So in Montgomery County, there was the possibility of having a $10,000 grant. That application period is closed. But on November 2nd, the state of Ohio opened it up. And so there is another one, and that's the one that you most recently applied for. That is also for $10,000. And so I believe after this is all done, Emily is going to send out, we're going to send out resource links, but on businessohio.gov, I believe is where that website is. There's more information in the application process for that. There's some requirements for it. You have to have employees. You have to have been in operation since January 1st. You have to have a physical location, which that actually hurts some small businesses that work out of their, the offices. So that, having an office address at like the Event Connection is a great way,
Thank you for that plug, unsolicited.
Well, really,
Right.
because then you have a physical location. If you work out of your home, you're immediately excluded for that.
Right.
So I personally see that there's a lot that's going to be changing in small businesses and how small businesses react, because they may have missed out because of one little thing here and there with those requirements.
The I know in the Reading Bridal District, or in the city of Cincinnati, there was some money, and I think they've taken this federal money and they've passed it down to cities, and then the cities get to decide how they can help. And I know that there was some $5,000 grants available. For instance, I'll just give you one. For instance, there was the one grant that's out there was to help improve your website. So we actually went out and acquired and had paid for someone to improve our website, and we will be launching that new website now very shortly. So there's different ways you have to spend the money. For instance, my employees, during that first shutdown, my employees, there weren't any events for them to do. Sales were coming in, but they were slow. Well, we shifted our staff to create Pinterest boards. And so I was paying my staff to create these Pinterest boards, and we went out and created about 150 Pinterest boards for venues, and to be able to be out there to make us a better company. So even though this COVID time has been very painful, I do believe, we're launching a new website for party pleasers. We're launching a new website for the Event Connections. My employees were able to work on a tool to help them with their businesses. So part of that PPP was you had to keep your employees. And then the other thing, it seemed like that just kept shifting. I mean, it was driving me nuts, because it's like, you got to spend all of it in 2 months. And then what did it change to?
June 5th, they passed the PPP Flexibility Act. And so then your 8-week period was able to go to 24 weeks. And that was really the result of, there were some places who, by the time they were able to get into the PPP, their company had laid them off. So the companies, they couldn't call them back, or the employees wouldn't come back.
Right.
So there was like, okay, so great. So now we have it. We can't even get our employees to come back.
Right.
So what do we do? And there was, and it's also, you've got an act that's trying to address for a whole nation where you have different economic situations already, right? Even within the state of Ohio, it's different in Montgomery County than what it might be in Cuyahoga County or in Hamilton County. So even, in that time framework, and that was part of the reason I think that they decided to, like, hey, we're going to give so much to each state, and then the state can decide how they're going to do it. And so Ohio happened to push it. We're going to do some to each county, and so forth and so forth. So.
Well, we, part of that PPP, you had to keep a certain employee head count and some things like that. Well, I actually furloughed an employee, and then we hired an employee that was an editor, And then we came into the studio and we created all training material for our new employees. So we'll be able to have training materials and prepare us. And I don't know about the rest of you, but our future events is off the charts. You know, we have more events in the future. And I think the second quarter and the next year is going to be a great year, but it's all going to be crammed into probably 6 months in the last half. And you need to be ramped up. And Greg worked on this program, and that was another project that we did, was to create all these training videos. So if you get this money, lots of times you have to use it some way to help your business or help your employees. I mean, I didn't want to just pay my employees just sit around. So it is a situation. So I think there's a lot that can be done. I will say I had one catering friend that I called and I said, have you gone after that $10,000 disaster relief? Sort of like when a tornado or a hurricane hits. When a tornado or hurricane hits an area, the government will just give businesses in that area $10,000 just to get back up and running. Well, this COVID situation was being treated by the government that same way. Like it was a disaster that happened and you could just go apply for this $10,000. So I called this person and I said, well, have you applied for that? And they said, well, no, some of my employees are paid cash. I'm not, I'm like, well, just go apply. And I was really surprised. They called me later and said that they had got $10,000 and that was available. So not only loans, but also, not only some of those loans are forgiven, but there's also low disaster relief, low interest rate loans that are available out there that we took advantage of with a couple businesses. So,
okay, we do have 2 questions. Can you expand on what you mean by the new legislation being tied to revenue loss?
Yeah, so I'll expand as much as I know at this point. So for example, if you look at your 2019 revenue, so revenue would be your sales, your top line income that you have, and compare that to maybe your year to date. And so if that 2020 amount is less, right, that's the first bar. The second bar is there's going to be some required decline. So is it 25% less? Is it 35% less? And that will be a requirement. We just don't know what that is yet. So at a minimum, it's going to probably be 25%.
Well, I think that's an effort for the government to try to make sure that the money gets where it needs to go. Because on the last PPP program, I talked to a lot of businesses, and to be truthful, there were some construction companies that got that money and they didn't need it. They got all this extra money and covered their payroll. They didn't need that relief, but they had written the bill so poorly that they got left out. So I think that part of what they're trying to do is, okay, what businesses, you need to show that you're a business that's been affected by this. If you've not been affected by the COVID downturn, and I don't know anybody in the event industry that hadn't been hurt by that, that money will go to you, because so much of that money got soaked up by other nonprofits, or not nonprofit, but other businesses that really didn't need the loan.
Well, and here's an interesting thing. So it was intentionally written somewhat vague, right? Okay, so there's this concept that's called relativism. You have to be careful at applying what you know now to things and decisions that happened in the past.
Right.
And this isn't a great example of one. So, in March, when, the sky is falling and we're going to shut down stuff, what do? So I don't have any clients in this industry, but one that gets brought up sometimes on the AICPA calls is the boating industry. Well, the boating industry has gone gangbusters because people weren't going on vacations. What are they doing? They were going out buying boats because they could go to their local lake. Who would have thought that when all this stuff happened? It's like, okay, well, we have a mandatory shutdown order. You have to stay at home.
Right.
They had no idea. So as they're going, some of these companies are now going through the forgiveness process. There is a possibility that, there is random audits, and any company that received over $2 million, they have to actually provide an additional form. But you can be selected for random audit. You were, right? I mean, so we had to provide them some additional documentation, and you were.
Was I glad I had you? Alisa, they're asking me.
Well, and it's important to know that when you go through that process with the forgiveness that, you have like 10 days to respond. So it is important to kind of have everything together. But, so kind of getting back to this question to get ready, that's why I said, have your bookkeeping stuff all ready to go. Because we don't even know if that revenue decline is going to be compared to last year, or is it going to be compared to first quarter to second quarter?
Right.
Or is it going to be, we don't
Mhm.
know yet. We won't
Right.
know until we get the text out. And I guarantee you that once it comes out, there will be information, published on the congressional website as a draft. So.
Do you believe that possible upcoming money will be gone quickly? like
Yes.
it was last time?
Yes. So here's my advice on that. I, because I have multiple clients and they all bank at different places. And so you may have heard, and you may have your own personal stories of people that who had better success at different places. And I had one client who their bank, I couldn't get any information on it because I didn't have a relationship with a banker at that place. And so I actually called the one at Right Pat that
Right.
you guys use and one of my other clients use. And I said, hey, 2 of my clients use you. I need to talk to you. And I have developed a fantastic relationship with her.
Right.
She was able to help me. But and it all depends on that organization. But yes, I be prepared and be ready to go, and that's why I think having that relationship, when that bill was passed on March 27th, I did not pick up a tax return. And this was, normally the tax peak season. I didn't pick up a tax return and prepare for 4 weeks because
Wow.
I sent out individual emails to my clients who I knew were going to be affected. And I was already pulling information, particularly the ones where I was doing back office stuff. I'm like, this is what you're going to be eligible for. This is what we think that we're going to need to have. And
Right.
we had as much as we could ready to go. And I still had clients who missed out on the first round because it went so fast.
Right.
Now, I think because they're going to be targeted, it'll be easier to get it to the people who are going to need it, right? So you're not going to see the big companies get it because they're restricting the number of, it's probably going to be people who have less than 300 employees, this revenue requirement and so forth. So
That's another one of those relationships. I didn't realize, I've done my banking with someone where it was convenient for me. It
Sure.
was near my offices and near my house and some things like that. But to be truthful, that big bank, I did not have a relationship with anyone. Well, I ended up having a loan on the building, a commercial loan through Right Pat Credit Union. And with that, I developed a relationship. And because of what that banker has done for me, I told him, I said, we're moving all our business. I don't care about the convenience. We're moving our business to you because you took care of me on this, and I really appreciate it. And it's really important in any business to have relationships that way.
Yeah.
Somebody that can help you, because on that first round of PPP, if you didn't have somebody in your corner, all the people that had somebody in their corner was already in there getting that money first. So, I felt I had a 1-2 punch here with a banker and Alisa. So,
With so many places to get loans, such as the city, the state, or the county, what is the best resource for someone to use to find out what relief opportunities are available and best for them? So if they don't have an accountant right now, is there a website, or what would you recommend on them and how to find that money?
So we're going to send out some links. Included in that is going to be the SBA page that has resources and links. There is still, I think, emergency disaster loan relief that is available. The state of Ohio has their own page I mentioned before, business.ohio.gov, I believe. Montgomery County, there's probably not going to be much more coming from that, but those would be where I would start. Even the IRS page has some information. If you go out on irs.gov, there's like COVID relief, and that actually will get you to the page that talks about from an individual standpoint. So, earlier as part of the CARES Act, you might know that there was a $1,200 advance credit that happened. Don't be surprised if your accountant asks you, so did you get that or did you not get that? Because that's going to be applicable to this year's returns as well. So those would be the places that I would start if you don't have that relationship.
Great.
AICPA is another place too.
there is some stuff on YouTube you can look at as well, but so much of the stuff on YouTube isn't local, or it doesn't
Right.
have that same
Right.
flavor.
Right.
So you sort of In fact, I would be on YouTube, then I'd call Lisa and say, all right, explain this to me. This is what I'm hearing there.
So
But-
I'm a huge fan of going directly to the source and not secondhanded. So whenever I see something, even if it's a news that is somewhat reputable,
Right.
I will go, okay, well, they said it was there. I want to go see if I can find it for myself.
Right.
Because there's so much mis or slash disinformation that's out there. And there's a lot of
It's on the internet. It's got to be true,
there's
right?
a lot of scammers. There's a lot of scammers right now, you
Yeah.
know, in all kinds of regard. And they're trying to get your information. Hell, we
Right.
have a grant that we're going to be able to offer you. They,
Right.
they're up. They make fake portals even for you to put your information in. So yeah, I would be very careful. But I would stick with the sources that you actually know. And
So do you think that I know the first money I got was $10,000 from the disaster relief. And I just went on the SBA site,
SBA.gov.
SBA and applied for that $10,000. Do you think some of that is still out there?
I'm not sure what the current status of that is.
I know because I took some other money, I may have to pay that back where traditionally you wouldn't have to. But it was sort of like a thing where if I took PPP money, then I might have to pay that back. But I think there's a lot of small businesses out there. You'd be surprised if you went to the SBA and you went to disaster relief, just like if it was a tornado came through or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could probably go in there and apply. It's not going to hurt or anything. And I would not doubt that you could get, one of my businesses got 10,000, one got 7. There was fewer employees than the one that got the 7. But I would go for it. I would go apply. If some of you businesses out there haven't applied for that, I think I'd take advantage of that and just see what's it going to hurt to try it.
Yeah.
Is there anything specifically someone should be trying to apply for right now?
I would, if you haven't applied for the Ohio Cares money grant, I would try that one. That's the one that's available now that I know of.
And
So
what makes you eligible for that?
that's the one where you have to have less than 25 employees, the physical location, so you actually have to have like a storefront. It can't be your home. I have a home office, so we don't have a storefront, which I'm probably abnormal from that, from an accountant standpoint, right?
She
And
just uses ours.
yeah, and more than 90% of the revenue has to be from the state of Ohio. So like if you operate in multiple states, 90% of it has to be here in Ohio.
Since the wedding industry is made up of mostly sole proprietors, what are the most common financial errors you see small business owners make?
Commingling. Even sole proprietors who are not sole proprietors, right? Who have been entities, the commingling. So a couple of key things that when I start working with, particularly really small businesses, and I've had people who started here and they've been with them as they've grown, is thinking what that longer term plan is actually. So years ago, I think I've got my certified financial planning designation back in the 90s, just because I thought it was so important. And working with small businesses, and I'm the same way now. I don't have a livelihood. I can't do the things I want to do in my personal life if I don't have my business. So having that, making sure you have that kind of that big picture. When we came up with the name that we had for our business with Mosaic, it was intentional, right? Because so often I think businesses look at things in silos. They're like, okay, well, I'm thinking about just my sales, or I'm thinking about just this, or I'm thinking about just that. And they don't really take that step back to look at the whole picture, right? If you're right up on a mosaic, all you see is the little pieces of glass, as opposed to when you stand back like, oh, wow, that's a great picture, like a Monet picture, right? So.
Right.
So I think that, commingling is probably one of the things, but then actually having a plan and then having the discipline to stick to it.
Mhm.
And a lot of times that's where I try and remind people and help them. It's like, well, I can't do it for them, but I can say, well, remember we talked about this. And there has been times where I've had clients where they're like, I know you told me about this. And then finally, like now I see the value of it. And more than any time this year, it has been the value of emergency funds,
Right.
That's the one I probably preach about a lot. It's like, we need to have an emergency fund. And it needs to be not just, $1,000 that you hear Dave Ramsey talk about, which is great. That's a good starter. But for a business, you want to make sure that you have 3 to 6 months of your operating expenses kind of just sitting aside in cash, right? So that if something happens, you can keep going, right? So, and no more than this year has that proven to be true,
Indeed.
right? And it's still, there's some still uncertainty that's out there.
I think Bob Talty, who was one of our speakers a couple luncheons ago, has the Small Business Resource Center. And this is where, having the right pieces, Bob will help you put together a business plan. Alisa's got, can help with that too, but I'm just saying the resource center that we have here at the Event Connections with Bob and that checklist that we had from his webinar, that would tie right into Alisa. And lots of times I'll put together a business plan and I'll take it to Alisa and she'll say, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or how are you going to do that? And, my businesses, what I try to do is have businesses that run alongside that are getting synergy off of each other. In fact, the Event Connections and the 80 members that are part of the Event Connections right now, I feel like there's synergy with us to be able to go do something. And with PWG, having those good resources of people that and that. So hopefully you'll take advantage. You haven't mentioned it, but Edward, your husband, he has worked with cities and in planning, and maybe just comment a little bit on that.
Yeah, so he has a background in finance, more on the quality side, actually. We met at NCR, as if you lived in the Dayton area, somebody who worked at NCR at some point. And so we kind of meet in the middle with that finance stuff. He's not an accountant, but he's, a financial wizard in some ways. And so, yeah, we've worked with some cities and local entities when they've been getting ready to maybe propose a levy and why it needs it, what's the financial resources. In most recent years, actually, he started a nonprofit. So he only does that kind of when it comes up because he's been focused on the nonprofit and dealing with the opioid addiction issue. So you have another one.
We have one last question and then we're going to wrap things up. If I take a grant such as the CARES Act, will it affect how much money I owe or get back when I file my taxes?
So if you take the CARES Act depends on what it was. So if it is the EIDL, no, it should not, because it's tax exempt. It is just a grant from that standpoint. PPP, it is not income, but then we get into that deductibility issue that I was talking about, where it might have this sideways effect until they get this other additional legislation passed. But grant money by definition is supposed to be tax exempt, so it should not affect that.
Hey, Greg, what's in the future here? What are we doing?
What's coming down the road is, well, lots of things. Our next luncheon will be in January 13th, and we're going to stick with the virtual format. So we've got we're working right now to put together that entire meeting, but again, it will be virtual. So everybody has the ability to get involved in that. A newsletter will be coming out in the next week. I'll be watching for that. In that newsletter, we will have those links that Lisa has been mentioning off and on. So if you didn't take dubious notes, they're going to be given to you in a newsletter format here in just a week or so. So be aware of that as well. Emily, so we've got some giveaways to give away, right?
Yes, we're going to be giving away 2 free luncheons to our next in-person luncheon.
Real luncheon.
Not just hey, just real quick, Let me just mention something. We want to be of value to the small businesses.
Absolutely.
And if there's a topic you would like for us to cover, if there's a person that since TGF Holdings, bought the Perfect Wedding Guide in this market, I've tried to share with you the people that have helped me, and we want to make sure that there's topics that we're covering that's relevant for you. if there's a speaker that you know, a lot of you, you've been very successful in your business for some reason. If you would be, interested in sharing or speaking at a luncheon, or doing we're trying to create a library of information that people can tap in. Even that small business resource center, being able to create things there. So please drop us a note, be in touch with Greg, and go from there. All right, Emily, what were you going to say here?
All right, so today we're going to be giving away 2 future luncheons to our live in-person luncheons, and the winner of those today are Miss Pendra Lee.
All right, Pendra.
Pendra from Viva La Strings.
And Lori Osborne.
Lori from TLC Events.
All
Good
right.
to have both of you guys with us today. Thank you.
So we will be sending them an email, letting them know about that. To close things up, we have just one more thing. Would you mind going back over your points you made in the beginning? A few people logged in about 5 minutes into the meeting, and they wanted to ask, can you just go back over bridal shows coming up, the changes that were made with that?
Absolutely. So January is traditionally a very heavy month in wedding shows, and even the mainstays are having to make alterations to their plans. We've spoken with Claiborne Productions. She originally had planned to do her bridal show at the Nutter Center this year or next year in January, and that will not happen. So she has reached out to Presidential Banquet Center, and the proposed dates are the 16th and 17th of January for that show. Still waiting to get the absolute green light. We're kind of in a yellow light mode right now for that to happen. And then Wendy's show, the big Wendy's show down in Cincinnati, has moved their date once again. They traditionally are a January show, moved it to March. Now the new dates for that show are May 1st and May 2nd. So keep us aware, and we'll keep you aware of the different things that are going on in the wedding show arena. Couldn't think of the right word to say. Very, very important things. The Perfect Wedding Guide are going to be hosting 4 shows this year here at the Event Connections building in Dayton. We are hoping to do one in the end of January, but again, it's a yellow light situation, so I don't want to even give you a date until we have the green light on that.
It's probably January 31st. We usually do our bridal show here the week before the Super Bowl.
Mhm.
I don't think there's much chance of the Bengals being in the playoffs, so that kind of messes up there. But I will tell you right now, the bridal shows, we were at Bridal Rama during the pandemic, and that, for party pleasers, I know was one of the most successful shows of the entire year. There was fewer vendors. There was a great group of brides, and we booked like crazy. We had the small show, boutique type show right here at the Event Connections. When was that? The November?
It was in November, yes.
In November. And it was a good show.
It was.
And we were we practiced social distancing. We had masks and all that kind of stuff. So I would encourage you vendors not to fear shows. I think shows are taking precautions to do it. But there's penned up hunger for these girls to get out there and brides and grooms both to be able to participate. So we're planning on 4 shows with the Event Connections here. We also are meeting and looking to support the other shows that are out in the industry in Cincinnati, Dayton, and Columbus. So we're trying to keep you informed, and we want to partner with as many shows as we can. There's some really neat things that we've got on the horizon with PWG and supporting those bridal show producers. So
and with that pinned up demand for them to get out and talk to vendors, they are shopping online right now. Absolutely. So again, I just want to close this out by saying, if you don't have your listing up to date on Perfect Wedding Guide, let's get it done before the new year begins. Because again, we're going to have a heavy engagement session from Christmas to New Year's, and the day after one gets engaged, the couples are out looking on the websites for the different vendors that they want to talk to.
You know, our last luncheon speaker spoke about directories and how directories are dominating the search engines, that if and coming up, there's just so much out there that it's hard for a single business to move up. But if you're part of these search engines, it can really help. And I want to give you a little teaser. Jeff Clark has taken over the eventconnections.com, and we're seeking to take that website across the nation. And we're getting ready to launch. You'll get some information. If you're already on the eventconnections.com, there's some great stuff that you're getting ready to get that you're going to really like. But there's Jeff's been working on heading that up for us, and a new eventconnections.com website's getting ready to launch. It's so good because you're going to be able to market yourself as a wedding vendor, as a social vendor in social realms, and also in the corporate realm.
Right.
So, and then the tour thing that he's put in this package for venues is incredible. But hopefully you'll see more about that. And those being in PWG and being in the eventconnections.com are two great things that you ought to get that nailed down as part of your marketing plan for 2021. I know we've been beat up this past year, but I'm telling you, I think next 2021 is going to be record breaking.
And weren't you offering an incentive?
Buy one, get one. Get in on the Perfect Wedding Guide, and we'll get you into the eventconnections.com with a free listing. So let's take advantage of that as well.
Hey, Alisa, thank you so much for
Absolutely.
coming in.
Yeah.
I feel like we're giving away all the secrets, but we want to share them. And I appreciate you taking the time.
Sure.
If somebody wanted to maybe reach out to you, how would they do that?
We've already told them in the chat.
Oh, then we're good.
They know how to reach you.
All right.
Good deal.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. I know you've gotten something out of this. It's obvious because a wealth of information has been shared. We look forward to our January meeting on January 13th, again, a virtual meeting. Reach out to us. We'll be reaching out to you. God bless you. Have a great afternoon.
Merry Christmas.